Fight!
All right. Welcome, everyone, to the very first edition of Netherkast Versus. This will be a bit different than our podcast, a lot shorter. We're trying to go for about 30 minutes. That way, if you're not into podcasts, we're trying to give you something else to bite onto. Maybe each week, maybe not. But what this is a debate. We're going to debate very, kind of controversial topics or just things that are for fun. It won't always be serious, but for this first episode, we have which character is more influential and important to Mortal Kombat, the series, overall. Sub-Zero or Scorpion. And we have with us today, temporary username.
What's up?
And he's going to be defending Sub-Zero's case. And we have also Dango.
Dango, that's my name. I am Dango. Hello.
Yes, his name is Dango, or Django, whichever you prefer.
Dango or Gamermeister. There's a couple net handles, just way too fucking many.
Well, you need to pick one. You get one. I vote for Dango.
You fucking made them up, so you're adding on to it.
All right.
Which is Dango, fine.
But yes, he will be defending Scorpion's case in this debate. So, without further ado, let's get down to it. Temp will be starting us off. So, your time starts now.
All right. Well, we can basically break it down into 5 categories. I think the first 4, Sub-Zero wins hands down. The first category is iconicness. I would say they're equally iconic in essence. And what I mean by that is if you know who Scorpion is, you also know who Sub-Zero is. I don't think people will separate them into categories when it comes to face value. That said, if you look at the history of Mortal Kombat, and when the hysteria from the media came because of the violence, what was the most iconic fatality? Well, Sub-Zero's fatality was a quintessential example when people were saying the violence was a problem in Mortal Kombat. Scorpion may have the most famous move, which is the spear, but they weren't talking about the spear on CNN. They were talking about the head rip. And that fatality we've seen many times in many different iterations. And if you imagine what would have happened if that fatality was omitted, if it had not been in the first Mortal Kombat, that could have been history changing. That could have affected the way people saw the game in the beginning, or the level of violence in the game. And, if we go into an internal level and look at the story, if we take just the number of characters Sub's been associated with, it already beats Scorpion. But it's not even just the number. The relationships with those characters are more meaningful. He was a comrade of Sector before they were rivals. He was Smoke's best friend. Frost was his student. Noob Saibot was literally his brother. I would even count the love interest with Serena, or the potential love interest, because even though that was Bi-Han in the situation, Bi-Han was holding the mantle of Sub-Zero. And you gotta crown that off with one of the most famous relationships, which is his relationship with Scorpion. Scorpion is a Spectre because Sub-Zero killed him. If you're a Scorpion fan, and you like Scorpion as he is in his current form, you have Sub-Zero literally to thank for that. But, if you look at the story, one of the biggest differences is all the plot threads Sub-Zero's connected with. In many, if not most, he closes the deal. He thwarted the Cyber Ninjas in MK3, he reprogrammed Cyrax, and the Lin Kuei disbanded afterwards. He beat Sector for the medallion in Deadly Alliance, and, you gotta think about that. That's more important than people give it credit for. Look who Sector is, and look what happened when Sub-Zero got the medallion. I don't even know if Deadly Alliance and Deception would have looked the same if Sector had started the new Lin Kuei. There's a lot of conjecture there, but it's still very substantial. The thread with Noob Saibot. Taven took down Noob Saibot, but he was put into captivity and potentially rehabilitated by Sub-Zero. These are stories that came to a close and reached their logical conclusions. We didn't really see that with Scorpion too much. He tried to take down Sub-Zero, he found out Quan Chi was behind the scheme, and that was mostly due to Quan Chi's negligence than it was anything Scorpion actually accomplished himself. We have him trying to pursue Quan Chi in Deadly Alliance, he gets thwarted by the Anis. He becomes the Elder Gods champion in, Deception, and Shujinko is the one that takes down Onaga in conjunction with Nightwolf. Now, there's a case to be made that Scorpion was relevant to that, but the extent I don't think is terribly significant. If we're just looking at gameplay, the spear is important. I'm not going to downplay the spear, but what makes the ice ball so important is that it makes Sub-Zero win trades every time. So if there's an exchange of projectiles, Sub-Zero is always has the upper hand. He also had the slide, which was a low-hitting move, special move that worked at a distance, that gave him a free knockdown. As far as I know, there was nothing like that in Street Fighter 2. I don't think we saw anything like that in Street Fighter till Cammy, and that was 94, maybe late 93, and the slide was already well established by that point. If I had to sum up Sub-Zero's case, I would say he's just autonomous. He stands alone. He carries his own weight. He never relied on on the vengeance plot thread that Scorpion rode all the way to Deception. And he's accomplished so much, and he's established so much with other characters. That's what makes a story good, is how do they relate to other characters. And though Scorpion might be more popular, we're going by polls that don't have an established demographic. But at the end of the day, how far behind was Sub-Zero in those polls? He was usually second place. Now here's a question. If we had taken a survey of people who like Sub-Zero or Scorpion better, and it was just people who were familiar with the story, had a history with the games, would Scorpion still win? I doubt it. I don't think a strong case is to be made for that. But people usually like Sub-Zero because of the story connections and the history throughout, basically just what he contributed to Mortal Kombat throughout the franchise. I don't feel like Scorpion has contributed as much. He's doing things now in the comic, but there are things that Sub-Zero has already done. Sub-Zero already had a disciple. That was Frost.
Time.
Got you.
All right, Django. Your time starts now.
Okay, if you look at Scorpion versus Sub-Zero from inside a vacuum of what is actually in the games, a lot of Mortal Kombat fans would likely say that Sub-Zero is the, quote, better or more interesting character. However, that vacuum perspective greatly undermines Scorpion's importance to the Mortal Kombat franchise, to the fighting game industry as a whole, and the culture that gave birth to him. Fighting games as a genre, found their footing and blew up in the 90s. And what John Tobias did very cleverly was he created a character that, kind of represented that era of pop culture almost perfectly. The early 90s was a time of anti-heroes like Spawn and Ghost Rider and The Crow. And Tobias took all these characters and, put them through his vision of a mystical Asian tournament of death matches. So Scorpion, being that definitive 90s archetype, immediately resonates within that pop culture, bringing them in, almost automatically. For fighting game fans especially, he's a big part of what that 90s feeling of edginess and attitude was all about. It was this vengeful hellspawn Scorpion. Talking about his gameplay and how it relates to the fighting game genre as a whole, Scorpion helped change the idea of what a fighting game character had to be. His teleport punch was completely different than anything you could find in a Street Fighter game. You no longer had to, come at your opponent like head on like you kind of did back then with Street Fighter 2 and whatnot. You had options. And Street Fighter, even though its name would imply otherwise, the fights felt very honorable and structured, but then you have Scorpion in Mortal Kombat, and it's the exact opposite. It feels like anything goes and it's aggressive. Scorpion throws out that teleport punch and he's immediately right behind you and attacking in one movement. It's dirty and it's in your face. And it's the way that a fight to the death should be. Then you have the spear throw, which is one of the most iconic video game attacks of all time. And it just meshes so well with his attitude and the character that you really feel like you are playing as this spirit of vengeance that's fighting with desperation and rage and leaving everything he has out on that battlefield. In my opinion, there's very few fighting game characters that have move sets that actually feed back and reinforce the character's personality and story. And Scorpion is one of those few characters. And it's really a no-brainer that Scorpion is the mascot for Mortal Kombat right now. I know a lot of people are sick of seeing him just everywhere, all over the product, but there's not another single character that sums up what Mortal Kombat is better than Scorpion. Like I said, he's angry, he's aggressive, he's an anti-hero, he's neutral. And then you just look at him and you see this ninja with his sharp, bloody spear in his hand, and you get the whole dark, bloody, violent, Asian, gritty quality of the entire series. I could talk about his story and his ties to other characters in the series, but I don't think that's where Scorpion's best value lies. His story for his archetype is great to get new players into the series really quick. And once they're in, if they want more story, there's plenty of other characters whose, maybe only qualities are their story. I don't think Scorpion is any slouch in the story department, though. Especially with the new comics and Mortal Kombat X, he's now, rebuilt his clan and serves as its grandmaster. He's raising Kenshi's son as an apprentice. He's controlling the vengeful spirit inside of him and trying to be a better person. He's, in my opinion, he's one of the two most interesting characters going into Mortal Kombat X. Ultimately, Scorpion is the spirit of Mortal Kombat, and a big part of the spirit of the 90s as a whole that Mortal Kombat comes from. From looks to gameplay to story, he's the single most perfect and efficient example of what Mortal Kombat is all about, and that's why he is the mascot of the franchise and the single most valuable character to the entire series. That's my argument.
All right, Django, your rebuttal starts now.
Temp said a lot of really good things, and there's not a lot that I can really deny or kind of come back with. But he said that Scorpion is Scorpion, because of Sub-Zero, and there's definitely an argument to be made for that. But the same is kind of true for Sub-Zero. Like Tundra, who's Kuai Liang and maybe everyone's favorite, generally speaking, Sub-Zero. He may not have ever become Sub-Zero without Scorpion killing Bai Han. He may have never been set on that path to claiming the Lin Kuei and all these things like that. And who knows what would happen to Bai Han if he had remained Sub-Zero. He could have just become another cyborg. So I think just as much as Sub-Zero kind of created Scorpion kind of helped both of the Sub-Zero brothers go down their own paths of what ultimately made them the most interesting, both, Grandmaster Kuai Liang and Noob Saibot Bai Han. Yeah, that's really all I have.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right, Temp, your rebuttal starts now.
Okay, well, we bring up the point where Scorpion was inspired by Spawn, by The Crow, by these 90s anti-heroes. And does that make Scorpion awesome? Absolutely. I actually do agree with that. But it makes him awesome in Mortal Kombat 1 and 2. It doesn't make him, it doesn't hold, it doesn't give him a lasting value that carried through the story as the story changed. Scorpion needed evolution, and I think because he was based in something that was very intrinsic to the 90s, maybe that's why the creators refused to evolve him. In a way, the creators kind of sabotaged Scorpion's story. Because when Sub-Zero was doing new things that made his character more interesting, Scorpion was kind of running in a circle. As for the gameplay, the spear and the telepunch, they need no defense. Those are good moves, and they are very important to fighting game history. The spear never really evolved, though. The freeze ball did. We got to see the up ice. We got to see the ice clone. We saw more of Sub-Zero's cryomancy. We didn't see more of Scorpion's spectral nature until far later into the series. Later to a point where fighting games weren't even in the same place anymore. And yeah, I also can't argue that Scorpion is the mascot, as in when you turn on the game, he's on the NRS logo. But I don't consider that a democratically elected decision. I think things would be different if you took the hardcore, if you took the Mortal Kombat tenure, those who have followed the series as long as they have, it would be Sub-Zero on that logo. I sincerely believe that. And Scorpion does sum up Mortal Kombat early on. I think that the early 90s aspect of Mortal Kombat Scorpion represents that well. Not as a whole, though. As the story changed, Sub-Zero, I think, strongly rose into prominence, and he was a more important part of the story, and I think as he developed, he became more important to the fans. Even in MK3, I know Scorpion was supposed to be in MK3, but they ran out of time. But it's sort of symbolic because MK3 was sort of like, the season of change for Mortal Kombat. That's when the tone started changing. That's when the aesthetic started evolving. So it's almost symbolic that he wasn't there. And really, last but not least, no matter what relationship Sub had with Scorpion, Sub was supposed to assassinate Shang Tsung. That was the idea. I honestly think, it's hard to say. We're talking in the context of what if. But I imagine all the evidence points to Sub-Zero going to the Mortal Kombat tournament anyway, to assassinate Shang Tsung. I still think he would have been one of Raiden's warriors at the end of the day. The only difference is Bi-Han would have remained Sub-Zero, and Kuai Liang may have never come into the picture because he would have never had Scorpion taking vengeance on Bi-Han. That's the big difference. But then we'd have a more definitive Sub-Zero. I think it may actually help his case. Okay.
All right. Okay. Good compliance. All right. And finally, you guys have a 2-minute back and forth, and that time starts now.
I like blue better than gold. I think that's a point worth mentioning.
I don't like Gold either, but he's yellow now in the new game, so I'm happy unless you get that stupid skin. So,
well, the mask is still gold. The mask looks good, but I mean, that's another thing with appearances. How many evolutions has Scorpion had? Because I like his Deception one, but when you go down the list, I feel like it's very narrow when Sub-Zero's been evolving really since MK3.
That's an excellent point, and that's kind of the thing where I feel Sub-Zero is largely loved so much for all the story appeal that he had from Mortal Kombat 3 forward, and a lot of that story just doesn't exist anymore. Like, we're in a reboot now, and so, after being made a cyborg, like, who knows where he's really going to go? It could be interesting, but who knows? As of right now in the current canon, Sub-Zero, either of them are not any more interesting and not doing anything any more interesting than someone like Sonya or Kung Lao going into the next game. Whereas Scorpion right now is way more interesting than any of those people. He has a lot going for him right now.
I think that's a partially fair point. I would say it's fair because if we're going by the current story, which is what we're going into with MKX, yeah, a lot of the great things Sub-Zero did have been erased from time. But if we look at the fans, what the fans followed from the 90s all the way to the late 2000s, that's still very real to the fans. Those games are still very real. So in terms of legacy, I would still say it's very relevant. But even if we look within the story of MK9, there was some really good drama with Sub-Zero. I don't like the fact he was a cyborg, but I do like the fact that he felt bad about all the horrible things he did as a cyborg. I don't like the fact that his role was diminished, but I like the fact that he did encounter Noob Saibot, and he did lament the fact that his brother was a Wraith. I think these are good things. I think Mortal Kombat 9's biggest problems are just where the plot went and where it just...
Time.
Okay.
All right.
Yes.
Well, the debate is over. I'll let you guys reflect for a minute. So just talk amongst yourselves, talk between each other, and let me think about things for a minute. And we'll give the verdict.
All right.
So Justin, how are you doing?
I am doing a little bit better now that I got all that over with.
Yeah, I was a little nervous, not gonna lie. I was a little shaky.
Your argument was very good, sir.
Oh, thank you, sir. Well, it came from a very good Word document that I wrote a long time ago. So, props to Google Documents.
Thanks, Google.
Also, there were no squeaky chairs as far as I know. I didn't hear any squeaky chairs up till my squeaky chair did something squeaky.
Well, shit. I'll try harder next time.
Oh, I'm a fan of the squeaky chair, but you can sit this one out. Everything sounded good. Everything sounded beautifully silent. Sucks about that time, though. Sucks about that clock.
Yeah, that clock, bro.
That son of a bitch clock. Always making me do things. So, is, like, Cyborg doing math right now? Like, what does he need 5 minutes for?
He is... damn it, what is it? I don't know. I always think about when you play
All right, that's time. I'm ready.
It says at the bottom. Oh, okay. As long as you're ready, sir.
All right. I thought both of your cases that you made for each respective character, both of them were really good. But I think, ultimately, I got to give it to Temp and Sub-Zero, and here's why. Because for his full 5 minutes, and I had to stop him at the end, for his full 5 minutes, he just brought up every little necessary and important aspect to Mortal Kombat, from the fatality and the gore and just how big of a controversy that started, to the gameplay elements, which Scorpion, Justin, you brought up some really good, a really good argument for Scorpion as well in his moves, comparing him to Street Fighter 2 as well. But ultimately, I just think on Temp's rebuttal, he outdid you in the sense that while Scorpion took forever to really change beyond what he had, Sub-Zero's been advancing the entire time throughout the series, and that's what this is about, is throughout the entire series. And another aspect was the story. That obviously plays a huge part, and Temp did a did a great job at presenting the facts of so many characters that are impacted by Sub-Zero and are important to Sub-Zero. And without Sub-Zero, those characters are less interesting by proxy. And I think he did a really good job at expressing that. Whereas you even said in your own argument, Justin, we could get into story, but then you just kind of like pass it off like it wasn't important. But then you did try and touch upon Scorpion's story, and especially during your rebuttal, you stated that Scorpion's got a lot more interesting recently in the reboot, and while that's all well and good, and that Sub-Zero's gone down in the reboot, that's one game of many, so I just feel like the arguments that were presented, I gotta give it to Sub-Zero on this one. So Temp is the winner for this Sub-Zero versus Scorpion edition of Versus.
Sweet.
That is totally fair. Hey, Sub-Zero's a great character. He's my favorite, so...
Yep. So great job to both of you, and they were very good arguments. But yes, Temp edges you out by 1 or 2 points out of 10, and that's this episode. So hopefully you guys dug this, and make sure to give us feedback. Tell us who you thought gave the better presentation and your own personal opinion. Make sure you clarify which is which, because clearly, you know, if you have your own personal bias towards a Scorpion or Sub-Zero being more influential, or just whoever you like more, that's one thing. I want to know who you thought gave the better argument during this debate, and post them in the comments below. Other than that, have a good week.
Bye.
We'll catch you next time on Versus.
GG.
Fatality.